Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. My name is Tim Hutchison. I'm going to be your MC for this evening. We have a great show for you tonight. But before we get to tonight's program, I just want to send out a little plea to you all. I'm going to share my screen real quickly and show you the calendar. And my plea is that you can see on our calendar, if you've been out to the website recently, that we have about a month's worth of shows left. And then we're out. So we really need some of you folks to volunteer to come on and tell us something new, something that you're doing, share your story, whatever it might be. So if you would like to give a presentation, if you'd like to be on the program, come here to the astroimagingchannel.org, click the contact button up here at the top and fill out this form and tell us who you are and what you'd like to talk about. And one of our top crack staff will be in touch with you directly after that. So that having been said, tonight we have Terry Mann, who's going to give a presentation to us. Terry has been imaging Aurora and the night sky since 2005. Imaging the Aurora started on her first trip to Alaska. Since then, she's seen the Aurora from her own backyard in Ohio and the upper tier of the lower 48. Terry is the current secretary and past president of the Astronomical League. She co-hosts a monthly program called Astronomical League Live and enjoys deep sky imaging. And with that, I will turn it over to Terry.
Thank you very much. I will go ahead and get my screen going. All right. I'm assuming my screen is showing.
Yes, you're good, Terry.
Okay. All right. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about imaging the Aurora. And as you just heard, I have been imaging it since 2005. It was kind of a bucket list thing for me. I've always wanted to see the Aurora. And while most of these pictures are from Alaska, there are some that are from other parts of the U.S. So, imaging the Aurora is a little bit different than imaging deep sky or something along those lines. Aurora, you have to kind of make your best guess when the Aurora will show up. And it might or it might not. So it's not like deep sky where you can say, I'm going to image M33 tonight, and you point your scope and there it is. It's something that takes a little bit of understanding what the Aurora is and maybe how it works. So when I decided to do this, I decided I better learn some about the Aurora. And as I was doing this, people that I knew all of a sudden started coming to me saying, hey, the Aurora's out. You got to come out here and look at this. And the times I did it, people would confuse light pollution with Aurora, which I could understand very much how that happens. So I kind of explained the difference between the actions, the way the Aurora moved compared to how light pollution was. And it kind of helped educate people, and people around me got more interested in it. And then I needed to learn the how and when I can see it, which just took a little bit more work, and the science of the Aurora. Well, then I needed to understand the gear, but I've been imaging with a tripod and camera forever. That's the way most of us started, or a lot of us started. So I knew about the camera, the optics, and the fact you need a sturdy tripod for whatever you're doing. And I had my own darkroom. I started with film. I understood the camera better by having a darkroom and working manually. I think I started off with the Pentax K1000. So I learned about the cameras, and knowing as much as I could helps me understand how to image what I want to image. Another thing, now I start up the ASI Air and I put everything in there. I start up the scope, the mount, and I can say, hey, I can go in the house, I can go to warm room, I can go to bed, and everything will work. Well, the big thing with the Aurora, you're going to turn into a third shift worker, because if you're not awake, you're not going to see it. And never trust a hotel entirely to call you to say, hey, the Aurora is out. Leave the cell phone out of reach. Now, I use apps just as much as anybody else uses apps. But when I'm really out under dark skies and I'm trying to preserve my night vision, the last thing I want is a cell phone flashing. Or what I have found out, sometimes when I'm out where people see me and I'm imaging the aurora, people come up with their cell phone right in front of me to take pictures of the aurora on back of my camera, which blinds me. And, you know, you have to find a way to be very polite and explain, you know, that really isn't helping what I'm trying to do here. You know, wait until this is all over and I'll let you take a picture of the back of my camera. But it is amazing how much a cell phone is so destructive, whether no matter what kind of imaging you're doing. It just really detracts from everything that you are trying to do. And equipment, I'll just basically go by what I use. I use a Sony A7S, and it is a first generation one. I use that for low light video, and I really do love it. I use a Canon RA, which, as you know, has been discontinued. And then I have another Canon that I use. So 2 Canons and a Sony. The mirrorless works so much better because it is so much lighter and you don't have the vibration. And the newer cameras can handle a lot of the ISO, the higher ISO for what you're trying to shoot. And when you're doing this, what you will find, just as you find imaging anything else at night, it's a balance of getting the ISO, the aperture, and the exposure. It's a balancing act of how to make everything work to get the image that you really would like to see. I'm probably old school. Since I understand the camera, I want to do everything. I do everything in manual mode, everything along the way. I prefer to have total control of the camera. And, you know, a lot of people have their own way, and you'll find out through all of this that a lot of people have their own way. You might have a different way than what I do. And if it achieves what you want to, then that's what you need to do. Everybody has to do what they're most comfortable with and to work with the equipment that they actually know. So, you know, the first thing I would say is always practice. Try using what you already have. Don't think you have to go buy a thousands of dollar camera and lens combination. Use what you have and see what it will do. Lenses, you want fast lenses if you have them. Again, use what you have if you don't. My favorite lens, a lot of people disagree the fact that I like this lens, but I like a Rokinon 20 f1.8. I use that, a 20 millimeter Rokinon, an awful lot. I also, since I have the RA, I use the Canon L15 to 35, and I really do like that too. And I also have a very, very cheap 8 millimeter fisheye that you're going to see pictures and video from that I really like. If it works for me and I'm happy with it, then I think that is the most important thing, because I think with astro imaging, whether it's processing or the way you take a picture, it's kind of a personal thing that you do not to impress others as much as you and enjoy what you're doing. And you can see what you are creating. And, you know, if somebody else likes it, then I think that's great. But if they don't particularly like it, then they have their own way of doing things. And I think that's good too. What makes you happy is the most important thing. And again, as I said, with lenses too, start with what you have. Don't think you have to go buy things to make this picture. Don't invest money until you find out what you really like and what kind of imaging you would like to do. Tripods and intervalometers. I'm old school here again. I use a wired intervalometer. I have not had the best of luck with wireless. Maybe I haven't found what really works best for me, but the intervalometers that I use, and I use the Canon ones, and I've used some other ones too, seem to work best. I understand exactly what I'm doing with it, and I understand when something goes wrong, what I need to work with. So I still use an intervalometer. Canon does not have the built-in one yet, unfortunately, like Nikon does. Tripods. I do use carbon fiber. I still have some metal tripods, some of the better metal tripods, but I went to carbon fiber because I got tired of flying and trying to lug all this weight around. You know, as you get older, you try to lighten up the weight, try to make it a little bit easier. I find when I lighten up some of the weight, then I tend to take more stuff. So I kind of ruined the whole idea here, but using a fiber tripod is one of the things I do. I have 2 of them that I take just about everywhere with me, whether it's a road trip or flying. And I just know I'm going to have 2 big suitcases because one's going to have a lot of equipment and the other's going to have a lot of clothes. But that works best for me. The one thing in the extremely cold weather in Alaska, the one thing I did have happen is one of my intervalometers, I didn't tug on it, pull on it or whatever, but I was working in probably around 20 below zero one night and I had it in my hand. And all I did was barely turn and the wire just broke in 2. Always carry a spare. I always carry spare batteries, spare everything that I possibly can bring with me. And this is probably some of what you already know. With Aurora, find a good composition if possible. The Aurora moves fast sometimes. It moves very fast. And sometimes that can be next to impossible. But like with this image, I was on top of a hill and some beautiful trees. This is Fairbanks in the background. And I had time to position myself and to kind of move, use a different lens, get the picture that I wanted to with it. It was not moving so fast that I could not find a composition. Keep the batteries in your pocket. I do that no matter where I'm at, unless it's summertime. If it's cold out, keep the batteries close to you to keep them warm. Always shooting raw. Focus your camera. Now, there's been a lot of people that do this differently. I've seen many people that just focus it in the day and on a distant object and then tape it down. I've seen people use autofocus during the day, put it on manual and tape it down. And then I've seen others use a flashlight and light up something at night and focus the camera. Taping it down is what I used to do all the time. Now I guess I've gotten used to the fact of I don't want to really touch my lens or move the camera and tripod hardly any once I'm set up. And if I'm going to, I'm always going to recheck focus. So I more or less do most of my focusing probably right as the sun goes down and do it that way. Cold weather can change the focus, and we know most of the times it does, especially if you're running a time lapse all night long. That's something that I always check the focus. Or I have 2 lenses that the focus can slide back. If I point that lens up to the sky, the lens itself, the focuser will slide back because of the weight if it doesn't have a lock. So I have gotten those rubber bands, or really kind of stiff rubber bands that you can put on the lens to keep it from sliding. But very honestly, it's a pain, and it does not keep your focus as crisp as what I like to see it. Bringing the camera inside at night, especially when it's really cold, I always have the large Ziploc bags with the silica gel pouch packs in it to keep the moisture low. I don't want to mess up the electronics on the camera. So what I do when I'm bringing it inside and it's freezing cold outside, I take the memory card out of the camera and then I put the camera in the bag while I'm outside, zip it up, and then take the camera inside and let it settle overnight. And so the moisture is not near as bad. And that is a lot easier on the electronics that are in the camera. Be ready for the possibilities. Scout out places during the day to shoot. And, you know, a lot of you know this too. It's so weird how during the day I can look and be very comfortable and understand all my surroundings. Then when you get out at night, all of a sudden everything looks a little different. Things just seem so much different to point the camera or just the whole feel of the place. But scout during the day, and a lot of times when I'm traveling places I've never been before, I will find a guide that takes groups out for one night and try to find some places that they go to shoot at to help me have more variety of different shooting compositions. And I have done that a few times, especially when I'm far from home. It helps because it takes a lot of time to scout, to really find places, good places and good views, and dark skies are where you think they'll be darkest at night. It takes a lot of time out to scout. So, you're looking for the darkest place you can find, and how the aurora will look in the camera, or how even the night sky, if you're just doing a camera on a tripod photography type thing. And one of the things, the aurora a lot of times will be so faint that your eyes will not see it. I always take a picture where I think you might see some aurora. And there's been times I'm killing time because the aurora is not visible, and I will take a shot, and all of a sudden I realize, hey, I have that glow already starting over there. And it kind of helps you to understand where the aurora might be starting up at. And a lot of times, yes, it's in the north, but sometimes when you first see it, it's not exactly in the north sometimes. It can show up anywhere it feels like on that evening. And checking the weather forecast, I'll be very honest. I went to Alaska one time for about 2 weeks, and it's the only time I have ever been clouded out for the whole trip. Again, you make your best guess and you hope it all works out. But I always have plan B, because I have been for eclipses, I have been for meteor showers, whatever. And that's what I've went for. But if it doesn't work out, my whole trip isn't ruined. I find other things that I can do and things that I really enjoy visiting. And know your camera. Do not wait until you're under a great aurora and all of a sudden say, whoa, I need to change my ISO. How do I do that? Know your camera, really work with it. Maybe under a dark sky when you're not really trying to shoot a target, but learn how to operate that camera in the dark know it by feel, know where everything is at. When I watch an eclipse or even the aurora, a lot of times, I don't even look at the camera. I know where my settings are at, and I know where I started. So I know if I need to change it faster, slower, I know which way to turn, and I know where everything is located. And that is really important no matter what you are imaging, I think. Just like the eclipse is coming up, I never, ever looked down at my camera during a total or eclipse or even the annular eclipse. I need to know everything. I want to watch the special parts here. I want to watch totality. I want to watch it when it's annular. I want to watch it from the beginning to the end. I don't want to be looking at my camera. So know the camera, know the lens, and get the feel for what it's like working in the dark to see if you can't find the adjustments that you want to make. And camera settings. As I said, I use manual, and everybody has their own way they're most comfortable with. I know the limits of my lenses. I know where the coma becomes too much in the corners. I know when I need to stop it down. My 20 millimeter f1.8, I stop down. I usually stop that down unless I'm really trying to catch some very, very, very faint aurora, and I'm just trying to see what's there, not necessarily take the best of pictures. So sometimes I use it wide open, but most of the times I don't. Excuse me. Naturally, you want it as fast as you can get it because you're trying to catch everything you can. But when the coma becomes too much, then you have to stop and think. You've got that sweet spot in that lens. You might have to crop whatever it is you're taking, but you always have to consider what your lens is actually capable of. And that you need to experiment with too. Your camera, how to use that, your lens, and what the lens can actually do. And most of the time I am working, depending on which camera I'm working with. My 6D, usually my ISO is somewhere between 1600 and 3200. Now I can push it on up to 5000 ISO, but I try to keep that as low as I can. The RA I can push up. I can push that ISO up fairly high with my 20 millimeter or my L lens. The Sony, The video you will see, all of the video you will see is shot at ISO 25,000 on the Sony, and it does a very nice job, in my humble opinion. And I'm one of those people. I want structure. When I'm taking Aurora pictures, I do not want a blob of Aurora. Sometimes you have little sections that might be a little blobby, because if you notice, if you've seen Aurora and really active Aurora, a part of it will be very bright, just like on this picture. You see the bright section, and then you see how dim it is at the top. So you can't hardly balance. There's a lot of times you cannot balance that super bright part with the very dim part. So you have to just do the best you can do. What I do for myself is kick my ISO up as high as I can get it for that camera, and I keep my exposure as low and fast as I can, so I can pick up the structures that you see within the Aurora. It's just something, the way I prefer to do it. And the white balance, a lot of people use auto, and I've tried it. I just kind of like setting my own white balance, and I'll start between 38 and 42. And if it does not look good, and I check everything, I can always change anything, but these are my starting points. And if I don't like the way the image looks, then I will change my white balance setting to where I do like it. And that's something, again, that I think everybody has their own way they like their images to look. And then the next thing, forecasting. Like I said, the Aurora is not an exact science. You can look at all these pointers that you can look at and give you the good ideas of what it's doing, but the reality is it's not exact. And the reality is it can be perfect. It can be so clear and all the indicators are there and nothing shows up. I have had that happen quite a few times. Everything's ready to go. You think it's going to be here and nothing happens. Again, always have a plan B to do to fill the time in case you are staying up all night. It gives you some other things to do. So I look at a variety of things. I do look at the KP. I'm not a big KP, believer. I mean, yes, it's there, and yeah, it's an indicator that I do check. And the KP shows what happened over the last 3 hours. So that's not necessarily an indication of future conditions. But like I said, I do check it. And if you look at this picture, you can see where your KP levels are at. And for me, I'm in Ohio. What I do know in Ohio, where I'm at, if I have a KP6, I usually have photographic Aurora. It's nothing to write home about, but I can usually point my camera northward, and I can usually very, very low on the horizon pick up something. If I can get up to a KP7, I can usually see it. And that's just from watching and learning over the years what actually works in this area. And that's what you would probably need to check too if you have never really thought about this before. And with Solar Max coming up, we have seen a lot of Aurora come lower into the lower 48. And again, KP values. Now, I do chase sometimes. Honestly, I love Michigan. I head to Michigan. It's an easy drive for me. I don't even begin to get excited until we're on a KP5 and we're at a major storm level. I don't even think about leaving to go anywhere unless we're going to get up to like a 6. And then I start thinking, it might be a great time for me to consider going. And at that point, I have to make a guess on my forecasting. I have chased a few times and nothing at all has showed up because clouds moved in when they weren't supposed to. The CME kind of missed farther away than what they thought it would, or it was slower and it hasn't showed up yet. Now, instead of hitting around, midnight, 9 p.m., something like that, it's going to hit during the day tomorrow. So it happens. That is part of this. It's something you always need to remember, that you might see it and you might not. This is what I do look at fairly serious, is the Aurora oval. It is where the aurora comes in to the north geomagnetic poles, north and south. And the stronger it is, the wider the oval of light will get. And that's how the aurora can spread further south. It grows, it expands, and it allows the aurora to come down into the lower 48, depending on how powerful the CME, which is a coronal mass ejection from the sun. If it is a very powerful one that has hit Earth fairly direct, we have seen we've seen aurora from time to time in Florida. It hasn't been, the big, beautiful type, but it has shown up in Florida. It has been in Arizona. And with, like I said, with solar max coming up, that would be my hope, that we will see more aurora available around here. And this is the forecast I took from this morning that I looked. And I look, one of the first things I do is I look at this. If I see yellow, that's great. And if I see red, that's really good, because it gives me a lot more of a chance. It shows me how active that aurora is. The more colorful it is and the wider this expands, and especially if it's expanding down towards the US, it kind of tells me that we might have that chance of at least seeing some aurora. You can see by this forecast, the lead time was 83 minutes. So again, they are predicting, it is not exact, that this is what it should look like. We also see it's got gigawatts here, 30.4 gigawatt. I know one of my images that I took, I believe the gigawatts was around 90 to 100. It was a heavy solar storm that I had taken one image from the house here. And the probability of aurora, that's why we call it chasing. There's a lot of times you don't know. You're just kind of hoping that maybe it will hit, and maybe you will be in the right place. I can remember going to Mackinac City, where apparently their news must have told everybody that the aurora was going to happen tonight. And it was supposed to be a KP8. And I went to Mackinac City, and you could not find a place to park, a restaurant to eat in, or a hotel room. I ended up staying across the bridge at a hotel, and nothing happened. But that's okay. It's one of those things. You do the best you can. It might work. It might not. One of the other things that I really watch is I watch the wind speed. I watch the density, and I watch the BZ, which that tells you if the Earth's magnetic field has opened up and turned southward to allow all of the solar wind to come in. So when it is in the red, that is really good. When it means it is negative. If it is in the green, it has more or less tilted the wrong direction, and chances of seeing aurora are not good at all. So I look at the BZ. I want to see if it's red. I usually watch for a wind speed. I want definitely over 500 is good. And I just kind of, again, I use all of these things and try to combine them to get the overall picture. One thing too, if you look at spaceweather.com, under current conditions on the left-hand side, upper left-hand side, it will show you what the solar wind is, and this is from this morning, what the solar wind is and the density. And I believe you can look further down and it will have the BZ if it's the graph again, if it's north or south. So there are many places that you can look to find this information. All you have to do is search for forecasting aurora, and you will find a lot of information. And as I said, even if you understand what you're doing and everything looks good, it still might not happen. On the best of nights, you might not see it. And I always have something to do. And most of the time that is, go ahead. I got the camera out. I got the tripod out. Let's just do some quick shots. Do some constellations, do some trees with snow, whatever you can do. It gives me a chance to use the camera and tripod for other things while I'm just hanging out. And as I said, there's been times I've done that, and I have actually seen the faint aurora, which I never would have seen if I was not just taking some normal pictures. One thing, I go through a lot of memory cards. Luckily, they're fairly cheap. Take a lot of memory cards with you because at one point or another, you will use them for something. And so I keep a folder full of cards of empty ones, and then I have another one that I use for full memory cards so I can mark everything. Now, this is from 2005, my very first trip to Alaska, and this is my Halloween ghost. When you are imaging the aurora, it's moving. It's always moving. It might be moving slow or fast. You don't have any idea that you have caught a shape. So with this, there are pine trees down here, and this is film. This is out of a Pentax K1000. These trees are huge. They're on top of a large hill in front of me, and they are huge. I had no idea that I had this. And in case you can't see it, that's his arms, 2 eyes, arms, and then he just kind of flows out of the mountain. And it's only when you actually take the time to get film developed or look at what's on your memory card that you see the shapes. Now, green is pretty much typical. The first few times I was in Alaska, green was all I saw. I mean, it was pretty much green, whatever you saw. And your eyes see green better than any other color. And so you do pick up on that. And it depends, the aurora colors depend on where your charged particles hit other molecules. And in this case, it's oxygen. It's about 60 to 100 miles above the Earth. And so that night, I was seeing mostly green aurora, and I was thrilled. I mean, I'd never seen aurora like this. Just to even see the green aurora and the sky come alive, I was feeling great. I was there. I was seeing what I went after. Now, red auroras, they say, are less frequent. With Solar Max coming up, I have seen more colorful aurora than I ever have. And I have seen some even a little bit, in Michigan, in Mackinac City when I was in Michigan. And I'll show you a picture of that. But I have seen quite a bit of red in the last trip in Alaska, which was 2022. The colors have just been amazing. And again, it depends on what the solar wind, what the particles collide with in the Earth's upper altitudes that makes the colors. And this was taken on the Dalton, and I was with a tour, and I'd never been to the Arctic Circle. I wanted to go to the Arctic Circle. And so we were on a tour and coming back in the wee hours of the morning, and we were running right ahead of a blizzard. We were caught in it for a while, and we got ahead of it. And all of a sudden, the skies opened up for about 45 minutes, and we happened to be at this forest. And for about 45 minutes until light snow started again, we all just stood out there and imaged. And it was beautiful. And nobody else saw anything that night, which I thought, I felt really privileged that I had seen something because Fairbanks was totally snowed in. And again, this is from 2022. You begin to see the purples, the blues. I mean, they were all over the place. They are definitely more prevalent during sunrise and sunset. These were 2 and 3 and 4 a.m. It was incredible to see what these colors look like and the combination of colors. And I had never seen anything like this before. And being, this one is shot with a Canon 6D. I guarantee you I'm using my 20 millimeter Rokinon, and I'm probably shooting around 5 seconds. And I guarantee you I'm at least at 3,200. I want these colors. I can barely see them. And once I take one shot, I can see what's there. Once I can see what the camera sees, then I can adjust everything I need to adjust to try to bring out the color. But remember, it's always moving. the brightness is always changing. So you really have to just kind of go on the flow. And what I do most is I use the wired intervalometer and I control exposure. And I'm watching every exposure that pops up there. If it's too bright, too dull, I will change how long I hold the button down on the intervalometer. That is just the way I prefer to do it. Others have their own way. I just like to be in control where I can make the decision of how long I want that shutter open, and if I need to change my ISO, and what I need to do to make my colors come out more. And I've done this for a while now, and again, right here, I'm beginning to burn out. And over here, I'm barely picking it up. And this is what I mean. As you will see in a little bit, the aurora, the brightness, how active it is, it can be strong down here and really faint up here. So it is a balancing act of what you can live with and what you can't. And you just try to get that picture and that exposure judged to balance out a picture enough that you can see what is going on. What I have learned is in these dark spots is where you pick color up. There is reds and purples in here, and you can see them right here too. It took me a long time. I always thought this was nothing. There is nothing in there, but there is. A lot of times there's color hidden in there. It's so dark, and it's very hard sometimes to bring out. But as you see, if you look at this, you begin to see more reds and purple. And when it's happening so fast, you can't necessarily see it. You just have to realize, okay, it's really kind of dark in there. Let's go for as long of an exposure as I can to see if I can bring this color out if it is in there. And most of the time it works. But again, now you have here kind of blobby aurora. Up here, you can see you have details, you have more structure. And that's part of the beauty of the aurora. You never know exactly what you're going to turn up with. But when there's color like this and the aurora is so active, you know you're going to come out with something. And then I love this. I have never look at the yellows, and they're green here, the reds. You've got almost a turquoise here and blue. The aurora right now is so active. When it starts, we go through lulls, just like we were talking before the show here. Sunspots, it's been a little quiet on the sun here lately. But when it gets active, it seems like it does a really good job of kicking off some aurora somewhere. I have never seen the yellows and reds blend like this. And this is from 2022. And there was night after night after night like this. Every night was just unbelievable. And that's partially why I've been doing Aurora talks, because of people think that maybe they might like to go to Alaska, or they might like to go to the UP of Michigan or Minnesota. Those are two great places. I know for me in Ohio, if I want to go to the UP of Minnesota, if I go up on Lake Superior, for me, it's about a 14-hour drive. If I want to go to Michigan, I'm looking, if I go to the UP of Michigan, Marquette, it's about a 10 to 11-hour drive. It's not that far if you like driving and road trips, or if you want to go to Alaska or another place. To see this right now over the next 2 or 3 years, if you want to do it, I would honestly think this would be a fantastic time to do it, because the auroras are active, the colors are vibrant. I mean, it jumps out at you. You will just stand there with your jaw on the ground sometimes. It is truly an amazing experience. So as I said, more activity hopefully means more active aurora. So let's say it's a clear night and the quiet arc is beginning to fire up, and I'll show you the quiet arc in a minute. I usually try to stay somewhere where I can shoot right in my own yard or right where I'm at. I like to drive around. I like to go to different locations, but I don't really want to be driving all night long and trying to set up and get everything ready to go. I want to do that for a while. I want to go to certain locations, certain spots that I have scouted out. But then when the aurora is still active and I'm headed back, I want to be able to continue to shoot. I want to go ahead and yeah, I'm tired, but I can still do this. I'm going to set the cameras up. I'm going to watch the aurora. I'm going to try to get the best shots I can. That's what I'm there to do. I came to shoot the aurora. I need to stay awake. I turn into a third shift worker. That's what you have to do to see this. And I have actually, in the last couple of years, I bought the battery operated heated vest and jacket, and they do an amazing job. I was at a star party this summer over 5,000 feet up, and it was cold and windy. And I put on my battery heated jackets, and oh, that felt great. So I definitely am a believer in that. Always keep the gloves closed. I don't care what kind of tripod it is. After a while of changing camera, everything you need to change on the camera and picking up the tripod, your hands get cold pretty easily. But when I went to Alaska in 2005, I made a huge mistake. And it took me 2 days to notice it because I was shooting film and I had to get it developed. But thank goodness the aurora was weak on those nights. Newton rings. I had UV filters on my camera. I did not know that shooting the aurora with a UV filter, you will get rings just like this. Hopefully you can see them. Now, when I saw, it about made me sick when I saw it because this was my first time I'd seen the aurora. All of my shots were ruined. I did not take the UV filter off. And back then, you really didn't have a way to process it out, or at least I didn't know of any way. But for me, I try to strive to get the shot I want without all these complications that I have to go in and process. So if you do this, take the UV filters off all your lenses. And I have to admit, from that point on, I have not put a UV filter on a lens because I have a real hard problem in paying even $300 or $400 for a lens and then putting a $20 filter in front of that lens. Yes, I know some can be better than others, but I would just prefer to be very careful with my lens or insure my lens in case something does happen to it and not have to deal with filters on the front unless it's something I am trying to do for a special shot. So always remember, take the UV filters off your lenses if you're shooting aurora. This was a real eye-opener for me. And now we talked about the quiet arc. The quiet arc, and I'll refer more to Alaska because I've learned at 9 p.m. in March, I can sit and I can look at the sky and I can begin to see the quiet arc starting. Now, this is a pano. This is a 5-shot that I did in North Pole, Alaska, way out in the country. And you can see the quiet arc start up. And as the aurora gets more active, then the arc gets more active and everything just gets more intense all the way around. But that is the way a lot of the evenings start. You can tell the aurora is there. It is going to show up. Exactly how bright or how active it will get will depend. But at least you know it's there. So when you hear people talk, the quiet arc, that is usually the beginning. And sometimes the quiet arc happens to come in right under the Milky Way too. And you can see there's reds here. There is reds that it is going to turn up. It will be active fairly quickly. But that was one of the first times I had seen it under the Milky Way. Now, this is a time lapse from 2005 with a Pentax K1000. And I know I was shooting at that time, I was shooting with the 1000 ISO film. And I know this is 30 seconds. So I'm pretty sure what I had done was put my camera on a balcony, put it on the tripod, and I let it roll probably half the night. And I don't know I didn't know what it was shooting. I was out shooting other things, but my camera kept running. And this was within the the images I had. So what I thought was really cool at this time, Watch the ground. And I'm sure it's sped up a little bit more than what it would be. Watch the ground. Watch what happens. It lights up and it goes green. It is amazing when you see this. And I have seen this happen so many times now. And look at what I like here when I talk about blobby. This is kind of blobby. Over here, you have an arc that comes in. And sometimes you get different kinds of aurora in one shot. You do this quite often. You'll see this arc come right in, right at the end, right there. You can see it's arcing out, and then you have this type of aurora there. But the ground will go green when it is super bright, when it is really active. And you don't notice it so much when you're imaging, but all of a sudden, if you see a really nice display and you just happen to look in that direction, it is amazing how much color you will see on the ground that happens. It reflects off the snow. And think too, when you see the aurora dancing, and I'll go ahead and start this. This is a time lapse again, same thing, Pentax K. When you see it dancing around like that, you are actually watching the Earth's magnetic field being blown around by the solar wind. That's what you see here. That's what the dance is. It is the Earth's magnetic field being blown by the solar wind. It just kind of, it makes that Earth, sky, and sun connection to really understand how the magnetic field shows up in some of these images. Even though we can't see it, it is definitely there, and it moves around quite a bit. And again, you have my ghost. But now I have an Indian over here. At least this is what I call him. I call him North Wind. There is his headdress. Forehead. There's one eye. Here's his nose. Here's his other eye. And his mouth is open. And he is creating the aurora. And you can see the aurora is blowing out. And that is the first thing I saw when I looked at this picture, was his face that looked like it was creating all of the north wind. And for people that know it, this is Clary Summit. I was up on Clary Summit. And again, you're looking at huge trees and a huge figure or shape that sometimes can show up in the aurora. And again, you never know what's there until you see it. Now, this is actually a coronal shot. This is overhead Big Dipper, Ursa Major right here. And this one kind of reminds me of my Phoenix flying away. You can see the wings, you can see the back, and it's just flying away. And again, I guess you have to use your imagination, or people see different things in different pictures. Oh, I'm cut part of that out. This was an amazing night where I was at. I'm outside of Fairbanks a little ways. Again, everything I have shown you has been shot with a Canon 6D. It's a little bit older camera. It does not handle the high ISOs, as well as the newer ones do. And I pushed it. I would push it to get the shot that I wanted to. And I guarantee you this is probably more like a 5,000 or an 8,000 ISO with a 5-second exposure. But on this night, the whole sky was on fire. The colors were amazing. And again, this is a full moon. This is a full moon. I took one shot again, and I began to see the colors. And I knew I had to make more adjustments really quick. But the whole sky was lit up everywhere. And color was just surrounded. It just surrounds you. It is so amazing. You know, I can look at pictures, I can look at videos, and I love it. It is so cool. But there is nothing like being underneath all of the sky dancing with light. It is just incredible. And here we go again. I'm with the 6D, and I will guarantee you this is probably cranked up again to about 8,000 from the grain that I can see, the noise that I can see, and my exposure is very short. I want these streamers. I want to see the shapes. I want to see the structure within it. And I swear, I think I was the only one awake that night. The rest of the world must have went to bed because I was the only one out and about. There was nobody screaming and hollering how fantastic this is. But when you see something like this, you just begin to know what you need to do. Again, Ursa Major, right up here. This is like looking up the railroad track. The pictures you see, you are looking right up the aurora. But to see the structure, to see what is happening within the aurora and the colors and the motion, it's all a bit overwhelming. And I've heard people say, hey, I've seen it once, I don't need to see it again. And it's never the same. It's like an eclipse. It's like the corona and the eclipse and a total eclipse. It is never the same. The science is there. The science is the same. The colors, the motion, the energy, it's all different every time. And again, look at the ground. I'm picking up the reds from the ground. It's amazing. And you can see again, my reds are coming out, but I'm burning out because down here it is moving super fast. And you can see the red fringe. You can see the fringe sometimes that rides along the bottom edge of a very active aurora. It is incredible to see this motion and color and just to watch everything that happens to the ground, to the sky. There is so much happening all at once. It's like I said, it can be very overwhelming. But the shorter exposures, the more detail, the more structure you will get in the aurora. But again, it's very bright here, very dim here. It's so hard to get that balance. Okay, now I don't know how to process video. This is taken with the Sony A7, and it is the first generation. I have my cheap, and it is a cheap old 8mm fisheye f3.5 on that camera. And I have adapted that lens to the Sony. I am at 25,000 ISO, and this is what I'm watching, and this is real time. Now, what you need to watch the speed as it goes coronal. Watch how fast and out. It is amazing how fast everything happens. And the first time that the sky, I was actually under a coronal aurora, I wouldn't have known it if somebody wouldn't have yelled, "Look up!" And I stopped everything because I was just so overwhelmed with what I was seeing over my head. Now you see how it's kind of at a lull. I just kind of, but you can also see the energy is coming in and it's building again. Look over here. You're going to catch all of it going across again, and it will happen again. It will spin up above your head, and all the colors that happen. Look at the reds. Look how the green, and it spins very quickly. And this is what you would be called a really active aurora. But look how quickly it dissipates. I mean, it comes on and it does amazing motion, just amazing motion and color, and then it dissipates almost really quick. And look at the reds. Look at your red fringe all through there. So you always, on this active aurora, you see this traveling so fast, the red on the bottom, and it is spectacular to watch. But I don't know how to process video. This is straight out of the camera. This is real time. And by this time, I am laying in the snow, just watching this overhead, because it's mind-blowing. When you see this in person, you will be amazed at what you are looking at. And this is one of the pictures of what it actually looks like in a still image. Ursa Major right here. And this is where you're going to see the magnetic north. It's going to be up and under a lot of times, at least up in Alaska. It is straight overhead almost. On this night, it was, you saw the reds. You saw the reds that ride on the fringe. On the edge of that aurora, you could see the reds and the greens. It is amazing once you get the pictures and you can see what is happening. But it happens so fast. If your camera is not pointed up, if you have to take the time to point it up, chances are you will miss it. You kind of get used to how the aurora moves and how active it is. And you can watch, it was like you could almost watch the energy bounce from horizon to horizon and then come overhead and just swirl. So it was, you learn, the more you do this, the more you get used to some of the motion. You can't always predict everything, and a lot of times you're going to be wrong, but you get an idea of how it moves and how to watch and what to watch for. And on this night, if I remember right, this was St. Patrick, one of the nights it was St. Patrick's Day. And that night, I had only seen coronal aurora a few times. That night, it went coronal 17 times. That's how energetic that storm was. And then I like this one too, because again, this is the Canon 60 with a 20 millimeter. I like it. I now have the 15 to 35L that the next time I go up, I'll be using the RA with that, and probably putting the 20 millimeter on the Sony probably. It just depends on how I work that. But again, you have the Ursa Major right here. And this almost looks like a hand holding on to the Big Dipper. And then everything just streams out. Again, two different kinds of aurora, two different structures on the aurora. The motion is faster here. Out here, it's a little bit slower. But short. I do this and figure my ISO as high as I can so I can have my exposure as low as possible. I know on my 20 millimeter lens, I'm probably going to be stopping it down to an f2 at least. So I know that's going to slow me down a little bit. If you look at the edges, you're going to see a little corona here. If I wanted to, I could crop that out. And then I know there is a sweet spot to it, just like with most lenses. You have, you understand what it is that when you get the composition together, you know where you need the best part of that composition. And then you have to think, will it work with the shot I'm trying to get? And you're trying to think all of this very quickly and still catch what it is you want to see.
And Terry?
Yeah.
There aren't any questions on YouTube, but I was interested to know what kind of processing you do with these still images.
I try to do the least amount. What I will do is use, I will adjust the exposure a little bit because sometimes it is off. I will boost the contrast a little bit. Let me think. I try to get it to look like what it looks like in the sky in a way. Now, again, this is probably, like I said, a high ISO. It's going to pick up more color. And so I don't really have to boost any color very much because the color most of the time is already there. I might sharpen it a little bit so I can make this be what the streamer, but the basic is already there. At the high ISO that I shoot, a lot of it, I try not to do a tremendous amount of processing. For one thing, I hate to do a lot of processing, but I will try to boost the contrast, adjust the exposure. Sometimes I do use, it's either dehaze or clarity.
What about noise reduction software?
Noise reduction, yes. Now, I tend to use Topaz, the noise reduction in Topaz Labs. I tend to use that. I'm not sure on this one, though, that I have done it. It doesn't really look like it because I see some noise to it. There are times I do use that, but as a rule, I don't use it all the time because most of the time, what I shoot, I can usually use the histogram and try to bring it up as much as I need to, because when I'm shooting, I have the little picture. I also keep that histogram up there so I can look at that. But I do use some processing. I really just try not to overdo that processing. And noise is one. And that is really the biggest one, and I've got the whole series, but that is the one I will use at night a lot of times to get some of the noise down. But I don't like to use that very heavily because I'm sure, as everybody out there knows, you can really lose a lot of detail when you use too much of that.
Now, are
So-
you doing this in Photoshop with some add-ons like Topaz?
Yes, that's what I'm doing. I do have PixInsight, and I have started working with PixInsight a little bit, but for me, there is such a huge learning curve. If I don't use it almost constantly, I forget my steps a little bit. So I'm struggling a little bit with PixInsight, but definitely trying to learn that. But I have not done any processing. All of the processing you have seen in this talk has been Photoshop, and I use Topaz noise reduction.
Now, Isaac asked, are these modified cameras?
No. Now the RA is modified, but I did not have the RA on my last trip up there. So I have not used the RA. And this year, when I go up in March, I will definitely be using the RA this year. And that's on the pictures from Alaska. Now, some of the pictures I'm going to show you, one of the pictures I'll show again, or I'll show in a minute, is I use the Canon 6D on all of them. I have not used the RA on any Aurora yet.
And Alan asked, what's your favorite place in Alaska for,
My favorite
for
place-
Aurora watching?
Or Aurora watching. You know what I've done? For me, the Aurora can show up anywhere where it's dark. What I have found is I don't like a lot of places because there's too many lights and too many people around. I've gotten to the point when I go to Alaska, I rent an Airbnb and I go out in the middle of nowhere. I go out where there is very little light pollution, and I go where I have a good sized yard, and I either have a few acres with nobody around me to where I can actually work and not have, the only thing I worry about is moose stomping my equipment. But that's, I guess, what I would say. I have been out towards Chena Hot Springs. Chena, if you go up on Charlie Dome, where you take the snowcat up on the dome, it gets you away from the light pollution. But I have seen so many people bring their cell phone up there, and there you are trying to shoot Aurora, and their cell phones, they've either got that flashlight looking for stuff or flashing their camera. And so it's kind of hard. That's what I mean. I've found so many people being around me really holds me up from doing what I want to do. So it's just easier to go rent a house in the country a little bit away. And most of the time, these Airbnbs could be as cheap as a doggone hotel room in town.
Questions are coming up. I'm sorry.
Terry,
Just give me a moment.
Terry, can I ask a question? Oh, I didn't make a statement more than anything else. I
Sure.
think a lot of us think of going to these places where they're going to Aurora watching, but in fact, you're going to Alaska, and Alaska's just got cities like Fairbanks and Holiday Inns, and you can rent cars there, and you don't need. It's nice to have somebody who knows what they're doing, but you don't actually need that. You're just asking. You're just, like you said, you're renting a place out in the countryside, and there's a lot of countryside in Alaska.
Yeah.
So you could just go out there and do what you want to do.
Yeah. I have never used a service to go to Alaska to spend a week. I can do it so much cheaper on my own, but yes, I have to get my own place and I have to rent my own car, but it gives me freedom. It gives me freedom to come and go. It gives me freedom to set up my equipment, leave it in the yard, check it all during the night, go out at night. It gives me the freedom to image how I want to and not have to worry about light pollution and other people. And, I like people, don't get me wrong. It's just when I'm doing this, I came to Alaska for a purpose. And this is what I came to do. And I want to be able to do it in my own way.
Norm is asking, have you ever been to Yellowknife?
No, that was one of the first places I read about that I thought I'd like to go. But when I started checking pricing, it was cheaper and easier to get to Fairbanks than it was Yellowknife. But I would love to go to Yellowknife sometime, I think.
Can you tell us about batteries?
Batteries. Yeah. Now my Canons don't do bad, but my Canons, when I leave them out all night, and I have left my cameras out, once they go out, they stay out usually. I change batteries, I change lenses, whatever. Everything is done outside. They last probably around 4 hours if I'm fully charged. I try to keep them warm. A lot of times I will have a towel or something wrapped around, or some kind of camera jacket wrapped around that camera to keep it as warm as I possibly can. What I do all the time is keep about one battery in each pocket, and I keep them on me, and I keep them as warm as I can. But my Canon batteries honestly do fairly well, but I always have batteries on me to change them right away.
Thank you.
Sure.
When you go out, do you do this by yourself, or you do this with some other enthusiasts that are interested?
I have had friends go with me. Basically, I do this by myself because I enjoy it. I enjoy that connection with the night sky. I enjoy that freedom of coming and going and shooting what I want to, and just the way to work the way I need to work. But I have had friends up there quite often with me, which is never a problem. You know, they're more amazed at what they're seeing. And but as far as tours, no, it's very easy on your own if you're not afraid of driving some in the ice and snow. Fairbanks in town takes terrific care of their roads. Once you get out on private property or in the national or in the forest areas, they do not take care of those roads because it's not city property. And I have ran into that the last time I was there. Some of the roads were really nasty as I drove out of town. But you only have to go 10 minutes out of town most of the time, or 15, and you are almost in wilderness, and you can see the aurora. You can see it from Fairbanks. It's just there's so much light pollution.
Terry, can I ask how many more slides do you have?
Oh wow, I'm running late. I'm sorry. Let me buzz through real quick. How about that? And I will get done real quick.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. All right. So sunset blues. At sunrise and sunset, you see a lot more blues and purples. And this was one of the unusual nights that the aurora started up, and it was just extremely bright right off the get-go. And again, you can see I was using the 6D, and most of these pictures are on the 6D. This is my coldest shot. It was 40 below, and it was an amazing evening. But as I took 1 and 2 shots, I was using film. My Pentax Ks were freezing. They were freezing almost instantly, so I had to rotate cameras around. And we'll just go by that, and I'm going to go by that too. I'm going to run this for just a minute. This is a very slow aurora that you can see. It starts off very, very slow, and I'm going to speed it up, and you can see how it moves. The top is going one direction, the bottom is going another direction, but then you're going to see some really active aurora come in. Again, this is real time, but it gives you an idea of the difference. Sometimes your sky can go soupy green, and it kind of gives you an idea of the different aurora. And we know about Steve. I was at Mackinac City last month, and I've always wanted to catch the aurora over the Mackinac Bridge. I caught the aurora. That was only a KP5 at Mackinac City. And the UP of Minnesota, this is my backyard. This is Ohio. This is what I was talking about. I've seen some excellent aurora in Ohio, and it was actually at 2 a.m. I did check that. This was an amazing aurora that I saw. The red, I had this redone. I shot it on a different type of film, and I had them make another copy, and I think it turned out the red is deeper than what I actually saw. This one is my amazing one. Again, here's Ursa Major. This was the Great Halloween Storm of 2003. The strongest flare ever recorded. We had an X45. This was the first time I saw pulsating aurora, and the aurora was just waving, a white wave through this, and I could time it, and I decided it was like a heartbeat, and so I named that the Soul of the Night, because as I watched it, that white wave pulsated the whole time through that display. And in 2022, this is the house I rented out in the middle of nowhere. They had 93 inches of snow as of March of 2022. When I got there, they had plowed out the driveway. This is over my head. My whole yard was filled with 3 foot of snow. And that's, sometimes it can be nasty. Now, what I'm going to do is fly through these, and I'm going to let this run. And if there is, and this is a real-time video again, I don't know how to process it. This is it for me. If there are any other questions, you can let me know. But this is shot with the A7S with the 20 millimeter on it. And it was an amazing night. I just laid in the snow and watched. So if there's any other questions.
There's a question here while we're watching the video. Beatrice asks, regarding batteries, why not use a power tank with a maybe possible to image longer that way? With a dummy.
You probably could, and I have tried that before. But running electric from a house, when I use the dummy battery running the electric, I did that for a little while. It's kind of hard to do. A power tank when I'm flying is not something I can take. There are other ways. There are heavy duty batteries that one of my friends rigged up for me that I have used too. So yeah, there are other ways to do it. Sometimes I just go for the easiest way I can think of, since it is not a big issue for me.
And remember, the issue is not just the capacity of the battery, but the ability of the battery to withstand the cold.
Yeah.
Because the batteries just get cold and they don't work as well in the cold.
Yeah.
I was thinking some of the lithium-ion batteries are fairly powerful and not that heavy.
Yeah, that could be too. Yeah, there are probably other ways I could do it. Flying with it especially is, you know, I take so much, the weight, everything that I have, but yeah, there are definitely other ways that I can do it. And if my batteries were dying on me faster than what they were, I would definitely be looking at another way to do that.
You know, when you get on a plane, you're carrying all these batteries. Do you ever get any grief from the airlines?
No, because I always have them in my carry-on. One time they told me I needed to separate stuff a little bit farther apart because they couldn't run it through X-ray as well. But my carry-on takes everything I've got to get it up in the overhead. It probably runs right at my 40-pound limit for me to lift.
How many trips have you taken? Well, to Alaska.
Whew. Enough that I'm comfortable there. I can drive around and I know where things are at. I love the wilderness. I love the outdoors. It is a beautiful place. So I've only been there once in the summer, and my sister wanted to see what it was like. And I took my sister up and we drove around Alaska once in the summer. And I can honestly say I like it better in the winter. It's a lot quieter, even though it's very busy. It's not as busy as summer.
So life below zero is your thing.
Pardon me?
Life below zero is your thing.
Yeah, well, I guess so. You know, there's times I can say I've walked outside and touched my nose and thought it was going to pop right off my face because it was so cold. It almost felt freeze dries. And your eyelashes will freeze. You will get frost on your eyelashes too. It's interesting. It's a whole different lifestyle, a whole different way of looking at things.
And your minus 40 evening, that's the magic point where centigrade equals Fahrenheit.
Really? Now that I did not know.
Well, that's one of the Chemistry 101 questions we all get.
You know, and that was so weird because I had a hood on and I got outside and I thought, wow, I don't have my hood on. And I reached up to feel my head and my hood sounded like tin. It was so strange being that cold. You know, how clothing sounded different when I rubbed my arm or I tried to feel my hood. And I was afraid I would lock myself out of the car at 40 below. And I knew I would die if I did. So I kept it running, heater on full blast, put my window down just far enough I can put my arm in there to unlock the door in case I hit anything to lock myself out. But yeah, I take a lot of precautions because I know in the cold up there it can be really dangerous.
Terry, I was curious about the exposure length, as you mentioned, is interesting. It sounds like you're just using bulb and just holding the shutter for. So what would you? Are we talking 2 seconds or 5 seconds?
There are times I barely hit that button when it is super bright and super active. I barely hit that button. But yeah, I am using that constantly. I've got on gloves. My hands are covered. I have that in my hand, and most of the time I'm taking pictures and I'm watching the sky to see if I want to move it and where I want to go. But I am judging the exposure, not using the camera, but by what I think it needs to be. And I use it that way.
I imagine after a couple of thousand images, you have a pretty good sense of that.
Yeah, I think I've done this enough. I can always learn. I always learn. When I talk to people or when I start using new equipment, I always learn something. But I have a feel now. I've done this enough. I have a feel for what I'm looking for and how I want to shoot it. And I know my lenses and I know my cameras. And that is really one of the biggest things I think you need to know is know your equipment and what it can do.
Terry, some advice about batteries.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a guest on here, Alex Cherney from Australia.
Mm-hmm.
What he does when he goes to cold environments is get chemical hand warmers.
Yep.
And use those to keep your batteries warm. It's the same issue with aircraft. You can't take batteries, but you can buy the chemical hand warmers when you get there.
That is a great idea because I use those all the time for dew zappers. I use them on my lenses. So yeah, that is a great idea. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm sitting here mesmerized by watching your beautiful Aurora run on this video. And it was a really great presentation, Terry. Thank you very much for being on the program. Is there anything else before we sign off here, folks?
I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
And Terry, we stay on after the program.
Sure will. No problem.
So you're welcome to join us.
Thank you.
Terrific. And folks, please remember to like and subscribe if you haven't done that already. And thank you for joining us. And we'll see you again next week. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
You can hit the escape key and then you can stop sharing. There we go.
Night.